Give me the word, boss. I'll drop him.
Everybody calm.
He was the face of a generation, the man who saved the world from aliens not once, but twice. The rapper who made history by winning the first ever Grammy in hip-hop. The sitcom kid from West Philadelphia who became a household name through The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
In West Philadelphia, born and raised, on the playground is where I spend most of my days.
The movie star whose smile alone could guarantee a box office hit. From Independence Day, to Men in Black, from The Pursuit of Happiness, to I Am Legend. Will Smith didn't just star in blockbusters, he defined them, for nearly 2 decades. His name was a symbol of optimism, charisma, and unstoppable reliability. Hollywood called him Mr. 4th of July. Studios rearranged release schedules around his films. To families across America, he was living proof that fame and decency could coexist. He was the rare celebrity who seemed untouchable, unshakable perfect. That man was Will Smith. And yet, in a single night, that perfection shattered. On March 27, 2022, inside the Dolby Theater, millions watched as Smith, just moments away from winning his first Oscar, walked onto the stage and struck comedian Chris Rock across the face. The world froze. Within seconds, the man once known for control, grace, and discipline became the center of global disbelief. Decades of goodwill vanished in an instant, replaced by shock, memes, and headlines that would redefine his legacy. How did it come to this? How did the man who once symbolized light and laughter become a cautionary tale about anger, pressure, and the cost of perfection? Long before the fame, the red carpets, and the million-dollar smile, Willard Carroll Smith II was just a kid from West Philadelphia, smart, funny, and desperate to make people laugh. Born on September 25, 1968, he grew up in a household defined by both discipline and turbulence. His father, Willard Smith Sr., a former U.S. Air Force mechanic, ran the home like a military base, structured, efficient, and often harsh. His mother, Caroline Bright, was a school board administrator who believed in education and empathy. Between them, Will learned 2 conflicting lessons: that order creates success, and that silence keeps you safe. In his 2021 memoir, Will, Smith described the moment that shaped his entire life.
Each of my siblings remembers that night in the bedroom. With me standing there in the doorway, I watched my father punch my mother so hard that she spit up blood. That moment, probably more than any other moment in my life.
From that moment on, he became what he later called a performer built out of trauma. Every joke, every smile, every show of confidence was, in his words, a carefully crafted apology to my mother for not protecting her. That need to make others laugh to keep the peace became his survival mechanism. At school, his wit earned him the nickname Prince, and soon, that charm would become his first ticket out of West Philly. In 1985, Will teamed up with his friend Jeffrey Towns, better known as DJ Jazzy Jeff, to form the rap duo DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. While most rappers of the era told gritty stories from the streets, Will took a different route. His lyrics were clever, clean, and family-friendly. Songs like Parents Just Don't Understand and Summertime
Make some mistakes, so to you other kids all across the land, there's no need to argue. Here it is, a groove slightly trans.
turned him into a national sensation. In 1989, he and Jeff made history by winning the first ever Grammy Award for Best Rap Performance. Will's brand was clear from the start: approachable, safe, universally likable. At a time when rap music scared suburban America, he made it something parents could play in the living room. He wasn't threatening, he was charming. And that strategic choice would define the rest of his career. But behind the success, trouble was brewing. At just 21, he found himself broke after overspending on luxury cars and parties. The IRS came knocking with a $2.8 million tax bill. And suddenly, the young star who had conquered radio faced the collapse of everything he had built. That's when fate intervened. In 1990, NBC offered him a lifeline, a sitcom built around his real-life persona, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Will took the deal out of desperation, but what came next would transform him forever. The show wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural bridge, blending comedy and commentary about class, race, and identity in America, overnight. Will Smith went from broke rapper to beloved TV royalty. The Fresh Prince had arrived, and Hollywood was about to open its gates. By the time The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air hit television screens in September 1990, Will Smith's second act had begun louder, brighter, and far more impactful than anyone could have imagined. The sitcom was a perfect storm of timing and tone, lighthearted enough for primetime audiences, yet smart enough to tackle real conversations about race, privilege, and belonging. The premise was simple but irresistible: an energetic teenager from West Philadelphia suddenly dropped into the manicured world of Bel-Air's wealthy elite. But beneath the jokes and fashion of the early 90s, it was also Will's mirror, a young man learning to navigate two worlds without ever fully belonging to either. Each week, millions tuned in to watch Will bring his effortless charisma to the screen. Turning punchlines into life lessons, his natural comedic rhythm, honed from years of performing on stage, made him magnetic. But what set him apart was the heart behind the humor. In moments of vulnerability like the now iconic scene where his character breaks down over his absent father, audiences glimpsed something deeper. That wasn't acting. That was real pain, transmuted into art. The moment became one of television's most emotional scenes, and it solidified Smith as more than just a comedian. He was a storyteller. Behind the scenes, his ambition was relentless. Will studied every camera angle, every script, every actor who shared the screen with him. He wasn't just trying to be funny, he was trying to understand how Hollywood worked. He once said that during filming. He memorized not only his own lines, but everyone else's too, so he could learn timing, rhythm, and storytelling from all perspectives. To him, success wasn't luck, it was engineering. By the mid-1990s, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air had become a cultural phenomenon. And Will Smith was no longer just a sitcom star, he was a movement. His music videos ran on MTV, his face appeared on magazine covers, and his theme song had become an anthem known by heart across generations. NBC had given him a platform, but his energy had turned it into an empire. Still, Will's ambition stretched beyond television. He didn't want to be a celebrity confined to the small screen. He wanted to conquer cinema, the highest peak of entertainment. So, as The Fresh Prince approached its final season, Will began plotting the next move. He met with producers, studied box office data, and built what he called a scientific blueprint for superstardom. Every decision was strategic, every role calculated. And then, in 1995, he made his leap. Cast alongside Martin Lawrence in Bad Boys, Will reinvented himself as an action star. The film's explosive success proved he could do what few TV actors ever managed: crossover into the big leagues. The kid from West Philly had broken through Hollywood's final gate. Within just a few years, Will Smith would go from being everyone's favorite prince to becoming a king, the undisputed ruler of the box office. But, as history would later show, even the brightest stars burn fastest when they're chasing perfection. By the late 1990s, Will Smith wasn't just a star, he was the star. The kind of name that could sell out theaters on reputation alone. When Independence Day premiered in 1996, audiences didn't just watch him save the world from aliens, they watched him become Hollywood's next great hero. The film exploded into a global phenomenon, grossing over $800 million worldwide, and overnight. Smith was christened Mr. 4th of July, the man who owned America's biggest movie weekend, a year later. He did it again with Men in Black, cementing a streak that no actor of his generation could match. But this wasn't luck, it was design. Will Smith had studied the science of stardom like a military campaign. In interviews, he once described success as a formula big concept, universal appeal, and a little bit of heart. He knew what audiences wanted, and he delivered it with precision. His movies weren't just action, they were spectacle, built around the idea that people wanted to feel good walking out of the theater. The Will Smith brand became a cinematic guarantee: you'd laugh, you'd cheer, and you'd leave feeling better about the world. Throughout the 2000s, he was unstoppable. Men in Black 2, Bad Boys 2, iRobot, Hitch, I Am Legend. Hancock each one a box office juggernaut. At one point, he achieved what no one else had done before: 8 consecutive films grossing over $100 million in the US alone. Studios didn't just cast Will Smith, they built release calendars around him for nearly a decade. No one in Hollywood could match his consistency, his charm, or his commercial reach. But Will wasn't satisfied with being merely bankable. He wanted legitimacy. He wanted the industry to respect him. So he began choosing roles that stretched him beyond the blockbuster formula. In 2001, he transformed into Muhammad Ali for Michael Mann's Ali, earning his first Academy Award nomination. The performance was raw, physical, and deeply introspective, a far cry from the crowd-pleasing heroics of his past. 5 years later, he earned a second Oscar nomination for The Pursuit of Happiness. Portraying a struggling father trying to build a better life for his son, it was his most vulnerable role, and perhaps the most personal art, imitating the ache of his own childhood. Parallel to this rise was another kind of empire: the Smith family brand. His marriage to Jada Pinkett in 1997 became the cornerstone of a Hollywood power couple, together, with their children Jaden and Willow. They presented the image of a family that had mastered the balance between fame and authenticity. Red carpets became family affairs. Interviews turned into motivational seminars about love, success, and parenting in the public eye. They weren't just famous, they were flawless. By the late 2000s, Will Smith had achieved the impossible: global superstardom, critical acclaim, and a family image that looked almost too good to be true. He was the embodiment of the American dream, a man who had conquered music, television, and film, all while maintaining the aura of grace and discipline. But perfection has a price, and behind the polished exterior, small fractures had already begun to form. Because when your brand is built on being untouchable, even the smallest crack can become an earthquake. March 27, 2022, a night that should have been the crowning moment of Will Smith's career. After more than 3 decades of discipline, charm, and calculated success, he was finally on the brink of the recognition he had always wanted: an Academy Award for Best Actor. The Dolby Theater shimmered with expectation. Cameras flashed, laughter filled the air, and for a brief second, everything felt like it always had for Will Smith: controlled, perfect, cinematic. Then came a single sentence that changed everything. Chris Rock stepped onto the stage to present the award for Best Documentary, Ever the Comedian. He delivered a few quick jokes before looking toward Jada Pinkett Smith and saying, "The room laughed. Jada didn't. Her eyes rolled, her expression tightened." The joke cut deeper than the crowd realized. For years, she had spoken publicly about her struggle with alopecia, a medical condition that caused her hair to fall out. The comment landed not as a punchline, but as a wound. At first, Will laughed along his trained, automatic response. But then he looked at Jada. Something flickered across his face. In the span of a few heartbeats, the man who had spent his life mastering control stood up, walked onto the stage, and the sound of the slap echoed through the room. The crowd froze. Chris Rock, stunned but composed, tried to joke it off. As Will returned to his seat, his voice cut through the silence. Twice, loud, furious, trembling. The broadcast muted the words, but international feeds carried them live. Within seconds, the internet ignited. 40 minutes later, Will Smith returned to that same stage, this time to accept his Oscar for King Richard. Tears streamed down his face as he spoke of love, protection, and faith. "Love makes you do crazy things," he said, his voice breaking. He apologized to the Academy and his fellow nominees, but not to Chris Rock. The applause was polite but uneasy. No one quite knew whether they were watching redemption or collapse. For Smith, that moment was the culmination of decades of pressure, professional, emotional, and psychological. In hindsight, the slap was not about a joke. It was about everything that came before it. Years of ridicule, the meme-ification of his marriage, the need to defend the family image he'd built. Psychologists later called it a trauma response, a man reliving his childhood helplessness, finally acting where once he couldn't. He had failed to protect his mother as a child, and now, on live television, he overcorrected in the most catastrophic way possible. By dawn, the footage had circled the globe. What should have been his legacy-defining triumph had become his public undoing. The man once celebrated for control had lost it completely, and just like that, the myth of Will Smith, the perfect father, husband, and hero shattered in front of the world. In the days that followed, Will Smith disappeared. The man who had spent his entire adult life in front of cameras suddenly went silent. For a moment, the world did too. No one quite knew what to make of what had happened. The slap wasn't just a scandal, it was an earthquake. It shook Hollywood, fractured public opinion, and left a generation of fans struggling to reconcile the man they admired with the man they just witnessed. Less than 24 hours later, Will broke his silence with a statement on Instagram. It was the kind of apology the public had come to expect: measured, polished, remorseful. "Violence in all of its forms is poisonous and destructive," he wrote. "My behavior at last night's Academy Awards was unacceptable and inexcusable." He apologized to Chris Rock by name, then to the Academy, and finally to the Williams family and my King Richard family. The tone was correct, but the timing so quick, so corporate, made it feel rehearsed, for a man who'd built his brand on authenticity. The apology felt like a press release. Months passed. In July 2022, Smith resurfaced again, this time in a 6-minute YouTube video titled, "It's Been a Minute." Sitting alone in a plain white room, wearing a simple polo shirt. He looked smaller, somehow deflated, quieter. He answered pre-screened fan questions, explaining that he had reached out to Chris. But he's not ready to talk. He admitted he had lost control, that he was deeply remorseful, and that Jada had nothing to do with it. His voice cracked, but the delivery was still composed, carefully edited, filtered through the same machinery that had always managed his image. And that became the problem. Will Smith was apologizing, but people weren't feeling it. The internet called it too late, too polished, too PR. His effort to reclaim his humanity through media only made him look more artificial. The man who had once made sincerity look effortless now couldn't seem to access it at all. Commentators coined a phrase for it: the authenticity gap. Will Smith had spent 3 decades perfecting performance. Now he couldn't stop performing, even when the world needed him to be raw. Meanwhile, Hollywood responded in the only language it knows: money and optics. Netflix quietly shelved Bright 2. Other projects went on indefinite hold. The Academy barred him from attending any of its events for 10 years, even after he voluntarily resigned from membership. It was a symbolic exile, a public scolding for the man who once embodied Hollywood discipline. Then came Emancipation in late 2022, his first major film after the scandal. Apple TV Plus released it quietly, almost nervously, as if unsure whether the world was ready to see Will Smith again. The movie itself, a harrowing Civil War drama, earned modest praise for his performance but failed to make a dent commercially. No amount of dramatic gravitas could erase what had happened months earlier. The audience wasn't ready to forgive. For the first time, Will Smith wasn't leading the narrative. He was reacting to it. The man who had once orchestrated his every career move like a symphony was now playing defense, note by note, trying to rebuild something that no longer existed: the illusion of control. And yet, there were glimmers, small signs that the story wasn't over. Fans still quoted The Fresh Prince. His old movies trended again, in a world obsessed with downfall. There was also a strange undercurrent of hope, a question that lingered beneath the headlines: could Will Smith ever come back from this? In the end, Will Smith's story is not just about a slap or even a fall, it's about the impossible weight of perfection. For over 30 years, he played every role flawlessly: the hero, the husband, the father, the star. But the man who built his empire on control eventually lost control in front of the entire world. That moment didn't erase his achievements, but it exposed what they had always cost. His rise was pure discipline, his collapse, pure humanity. In a culture that demands flawlessness, yet feeds on failure, Will Smith became both the dream and the warning. The Fresh Prince, who once embodied joy and optimism, now represents something more fragile: the truth that even the brightest image can crack under pressure. And maybe that's the lesson buried beneath the noise, that the people we put on pedestals are still people, carrying ghosts we never see. Will Smith's fall wasn't sudden, it was the echo of a lifetime spent trying to outrun pain. So, as the curtain closes, one question remains: can the man who built perfection ever live honestly in its ruins?